of Texas comes Houston's God-loving patriot and the voice of reason. This is the Lone Star Conservative, Michael Wilson.
I'm offended. You're offended. Let's all get offended tonight. I'll order us a beer. We can sit down right here and scream and yell and cuss and fuss and fight.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Michael Wilson, and you're listening to the Lone Star Conservative, brought to you by Texcellent AC Service. As I was teasing before the break, very exciting guest we have coming on. Joining us now is Jeff Yuna, a candidate for Congress here in Texas, Congressional District 38. He is sixth-generation Texan, Christian entrepreneur, licensed minister, and father of four. His campaign, of course, as we all desire, is centered on an America First agenda, small government, border security, fiscal responsibility, and all of the other things that we will get into here in this segment. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Well, thank you for having me, Michael. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And I really appreciate you coming on and coming onto the program and what we're going to go into. Now, I want to kick it off, as I do with any candidate, and kind of ask why. And what I mean by that is, obviously, you've had a successful, attempt at building businesses through this sort of private sector entrepreneurship. What's driven you to go from that side over to saying, hey, now I need to run for Congress. I have to be involved in this politic, this group politic. I have to make a difference here. What was that like, that transition like for you, and what caused it?
Well, so it's a long story, but to start with, I was lobbying for property tax reform in Austin. Dan Patrick's a customer. I talked to his people, was making no headway at all, just really looking for a voice, and realized that a lot of us don't have a voice. And I'm just really tired of politicians saying one thing and doing just the opposite. This opportunity presented itself, and at the encouragement of some friends and with some prayer and some consultation with my wife, we jumped into the race trying to make a difference and go up there and actually do what we say we're going to do.
No, absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And in fact, I'm very encouraged by the prayer part. I think a lot of people skip that really important step. I was saying that on my show yesterday, since, of course, early voting started today. I said, if you're skipping the prayerful consideration side of who you're voting for, that is possibly the most important step in making these sorts of decisions, that you have wisdom that can only come from God. Now, I want to jump over, with that being said, and start talking about some of those sorts of issues, right? Because obviously you've been driven into this saying, hey, regular Texans need a voice who's going to be there and actually do what they say they're going to do. And it's not going to be a game to them, which is something that I actually like about people coming from the private sector, because a lot of career politicians, of course, treat it like a never-ending game of how can I get to the next position, or how can I stay in this position, as opposed to how do I help Texans, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about some of your big things. I want to kick it off actually talking about the economy. I think this is actually one of the biggest issues for not only the middle class, but for people in general today. Obviously, we have tens of trillions of dollars in national debt, which, of course, drives inflation. And we need to bring that down. I've heard people saying we need to raise a bunch of taxes. What's your position on the debt crisis, how that contributes to inflation, and what we need to do about it? I know that's such a big question. You could spend 30 minutes answering just that. But what's your take on that?
So, I mean, the middle class is being destroyed. Inflation is largely contributed to the national debt. I own a pawn shop. We make loans. 59% of those loans are made to households over $100,000 a year, 19% to households over $160,000. Under Biden, we saw credit card debt go from $800 billion to $1.4 trillion.
Wow.
The middle class has been squeezed, crushed, and destroyed. Right now, our pawn balance went up because people are paying property taxes. We've got to get the dollar value back. We got to get the deficit down from $38 trillion. That's absurd. But we've also got to bring wages up. And Trump has a pretty good pro-growth policy going, bringing jobs back. Probably need to eliminate some of the H-1B visas and open up some of those technology jobs for our young Americans, and even open up university seats and get rid of some of the 300,000 F-1 Chinese student visas they have every year. So the government's got to have some fiscal responsibility, and at the same time, we need to create great jobs. As a business owner, my revenues go up and down. Politicians, they never see taxes go down. They just keep spending, and that's got to stop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like the way you presented this, because I don't think it's one single issue. I think each issue contributes significantly, but I don't think it's just one. I mean, you look out, and you mentioned H-1B visa programs. all the studies that have been done on areas and on factions that use H-1B visa workers, all of them, without fail, show a minimum of 10 to 20% wage suppression. Most show 30 to 50% wage suppression in those industries. And so we know that's driving down wages. And on top of that, it's also taking away specific jobs that could be going to Americans. And so obviously these coupled with $38 trillion in debt, already overtaxation that needs to be lessened. You combine all those things together and you get, this is why I know there's, and I get it, this consistent complaint from young people, how will I ever buy a home? I can't imagine even being able to save for that. And so I kind of want to transition then, because you mentioned immigration, into border immigration. I think you've been pretty clear of your support for strong border enforcement, that those here who are here illegally should return to their actual home, their country, and pursue lawful pathways. So obviously one of the big concerns, I think, and it's a reasonable concern from conservatives, has been as much as we like how the border's been tackled recently through a lot of executive orders, what happens in 4 years or 3 years if, God forbid, we get a bad candidate in who's not pro-border strength? And how do we make sure that we're codifying things into law and changing the dynamic to be a pro-border country? What does that look like for you?
Well, what it looks like is, like you said, codifying it into law.
Right.
The House has done a pretty good job. They've codified 81 of Trump's executive orders, but we've got to get the immigration codified as well. I don't want to say the word immigration reform because that brings up a lot of negativity. But no, we've got to get that DOJ, the immigration, and define by law the absolute number or percentage of aliens that can come here legally and stick to that. There's a lot of there's billions of dollars these illegal aliens are sending back over, even H-1B visa holders. You know, we need to put laws into effect that maybe tax that money that's leaving our economy permanently and going into other ones. There's a multitude of things that can be done, but certainly need to finish the wall and make sure somehow, I don't have specifics, that we control the number of people that are allowed to immigrate to this country on an annual basis.
No, absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. There needs to be a firm set rule because it's just been thrown by the wayside. And of course, we've had mass immigration problems, especially recently under the Biden administration, but it's been going on really right under our nose for generations. And so that's a big concern for a lot of people. Go ahead.
Michael, let me add to that. We also need to, in that immigration policy, it needs to have a cultural aspect. We need to quit allowing people that are contrary to our culture to immigrate to this country, whether it's a Muslim country, enemy country. This idea of asylum is a little bit on the ridiculous side when they've got other countries between us and them. So that definitely needs to have some legislation passed to put some teeth into that, so that if the Democrats get back in control, they just start dumping Muslims on us again.
No, and I see that when I hear politicians complaining about radical Islam in the U.S., I say, how do you think it got here? This is not some random ideology that is spread among Americans. This was purposefully brought here, and it doesn't make any sense, right? Any other country that do you think that Islamic countries are going to mass immigrate Christians into their countries and allow them to live unfettered lives? No, of course not. We all know that that's crazy, because those countries understand we have a level of cultural cohesion where we largely agree ideologically, and that's a good thing. It creates a strong government. And here in America, we've kind of, again, thrown that away in lieu of bringing in people that not only don't agree with us, but in many cases, it's directly contrary to the ideologies that define Americanism. So I also want to jump over, speaking of a lot of that, and I want to talk a little bit about law and order, making sure that that's one of our big policies. Now, obviously, you're a licensed firearms dealer, strong supporter of law enforcement. We know at the federal level right now, we have things like the NFA, right, the National Firearms Act. It's in an ongoing lawsuit because, of course, when you look at the NFA, it's a sort of quote-unquote loophole to the Second Amendment in an attempt to form what I would argue, at least, is a sort of unconstitutional gun registry. What's your take on the Second Amendment and making sure that the government is not overstepping those boundaries?
Well, I'm diehard Second Amendment. I don't think that they should be able to regulate other than I am pro FFL and federal firearms dealers, of course, because I am one that creates an entry barrier. So I'm a little bit selfish there. I think the NFA has been unconstitutional all along. The Supreme Court upheld it because it was a tax. Now that there is no tax, the NFA could probably completely fall entirety, but was it Brown? No. But the Howard Amendment in NFA, as signed by Reagan, that definitely, I believe, is unconstitutional. That'll get tested, and we may see modern automatic weapons manufactured again. But as one of 435, I don't think I could get the NFA repealed, but I certainly will do my part to do that. And my big support for the Second Amendment and for firearms is I believe in individual responsibility. And I mean, the country's lost it. We've got entitlement. We want the government to do everything. We've got to get back to the republic where the individual is the power and the power flows up from the people. And protecting yourself and being responsible is a big thing of mine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think, it's so crazy because I think that one of the biggest issues right now in politics in general is just a fundamental misunderstanding of American history. When I've talked to so many people who talk about the Second Amendment, and they come on my show, or I'll talk to them in person, and they'll say things like, well, you have to understand the Second Amendment was written for people could hunt. I mean, that was the whole point. And I say, you think that the men who came off a Revolutionary War, who were concerned about federal tyranny, and then wrote one thing into the Constitution to prevent federal tyranny, to make sure there was accountability from the people, was designed for people only to hunt? It just doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely. It was written for the militia and the individual, and for the individual is implied self-defense.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, I also want to jump over, talk a little about healthcare. This is another place where I think people are being squeezed out. I've been seeing lots of talks recently on health insurance and all these sorts of things. You talked about, patient-doctor relationships, how parents should have, of course, absolute authority over medical decisions for their children. And so I think there is an important conversation to be had on what healthcare needs to look like. There's been lots of stuff going on with the Texas Medical Board, but I want to get your position on how the healthcare industry needs to change. I think this also, of course, ties into things like Obamacare and all these sorts of things. What does that look like in terms of positioning on the direction that we need to go as a country in that regard?
So I think the government has created some monopolies within the healthcare industry, particularly, for health insurance. We've got a limited number of providers now. Before Obamacare, we had a lot. One of the things that I'd like to do proactively as legislation is create a law that says any company, getting government assistance, like the health insurance companies getting money subsidies, may not vertically integrate. This is a scam when the health insurance companies can own the hospitals, and then they can determine to send to the government, I need 200, I need 300. When they're got both sides of the coin, they're raising the price to match the subsidies that they can get out of the government, and which says nothing of doctor patients' rights, because I'd like to see HIPAA expanded and some teeth in it. In all honesty, in a perfect world, you would have your medical records on the blockchain, and you would release none of them, not even to your doctor, unless you want to. And then so the Supreme Court ruled back in 1905 that the government has the right to impose a vaccine based off the smallpox. So I would like to see HIPAA in such a way that, say, when someone says, well, are you vaccinated? You can just say, yeah. And your records are all locked down. They don't know one way or another. That's one way to solve that problem. But yeah, we've got too much data out there, including our medical records, and that needs to be reined in my opinion.
No, absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I also kind of, as we're getting close to the wrap up, I also have one more thing I want to touch on here. And I think all these things are, I hate using the phrase interconnected. I think that's been co-opted a bit, but a lot of these things are interconnected. You talk about, anything from inflation and people being able to buy homes or afford just living life in America in a first world nation. And you obviously can tell, okay, things are connected to immigration. Things are connected to foreign policy, to spending, to taxation. All of these things are kind of connected. Another one of those topics is what's going on with our farmers, our ranchers, and our food security, dealing with FDA oversight. what does it look like to go back to a time where we can produce, more American stuff, interstate beef acts, all this? What does this kind of look like in that regard?
So they are all interconnected. They're interconnected by government regulation and government picking and choosing the winners. And in like beef processing, the government has picked and choose winners. There's 4 beef processing plants for the whole U.S. There's 2 manufacturers that make the NGO corn seed. What it looks like is that we got to get the FDA out of the state business, restore state sovereignty. Texas ranchers selling Texas beef to Texans should have no federal regulations on it whatsoever. And the processors are taking all the profit away from the ranchers, and the consumer is bearing all of that, on the food side of things. But it's over regulation. It's over it's the federal government stepping into state sovereignty where they have no business. And I'd like to see that sovereignty restored, particularly in the areas of food security, things of that nature.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, Jeff, one more thing as we wrap up. Obviously, we're in early voting. Let's say, hypothetically, you end up winning the election, you go forward. And obviously, there's a lot of different issues that we just highlighted are interconnected. What does it look like? You get in, and obviously, you're one of many members that limits your ability to specifically get your priorities done right off the bat. What are the biggest things that you want to fight for the moment you get in? You say, "Hey, I'm in. I'm right off the bat. What am I doing? What's your goal? What's the area where you want to proceed just starting off?"
Well, to start off, and I've said this on my website, I'm going to file the 28th Amendment to ban property taxes on homesteads. We need homestead security, and people are going to realize that. I just read a Google ad. AI is going to replace AI could replace white collar jobs within 18 months. Those people will jump on board about not paying property taxes for their homes. But every turn, anything that requires additional debt, anything that gives money away, any type of grant going anywhere, I am going to fight tooth and nail. Any politician that stands in the way of pushing forward with individual freedoms and state sovereignty, I'm going to name them by name. You get a bully pulpit when you go to Congress. And you look at folks like Tim Burchett and Margie Taylor Greene, she's gone, or Matt Gaetz. They got their bully pulpit. Now they messed it up, but I am going to be that voice, and I'm going to give the feedback to the voters of this is why it is this way. We're trying to get here for you. And these are the people that are standing in the way. If you ever notice, politicians never blame one another. They'll say, "Oh, I submitted this, but it didn't go anywhere." Well, you know what? If I submit it and Johnson won't send it to committee, I'll call out Johnson. If the committee won't have a vote, I'll call out the chairman of the committee. That's my plan. But not just be a jerk. I also will work to build coalitions within there. I mean, I hope Steve Toth gets in. I love Steve Toth. That would be a great person to partner with. You've got Paul Luna. You've got, again, Tim Burchett. There's about 30, 35 conservative congressmen there now out of the 435. And we've got an opportunity just here local to pick up a couple more. And I definitely will do everything in my power to, work with those people.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, as always, I want to thank you for coming on, for giving us your time this morning, for being open and transparent about the issues that matter to you and the issues that frankly matter to Texans and all Americans. And thanks for coming on and giving us your time this morning.
Hey, yeah, but they got to go vote. So voting starts today. Vote for Jeff Una. My website's jeffunafortexas.com. You can see what we talked about today and much more. And thank you again. I'm so grateful for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, again, that is Jeff Una for Texas. If you'd like to learn more and read through those issues yourself, jeffunafortexas.com. And as he mentioned, today kicks off early voting, and it's not slowing down. So make sure you are getting out there and you are voting. When we get back from the break, we're going to jump over and talk about school choice because the applications have skyrocketed since the last update.